behave like a
Yeah.
normal person. Right now, she's standing over there, like pouting like a little child. I came in the studio this morning. It was 17 degrees in here. Like, what the hell? 17 degrees for what?
Oh, now it's got dark as well. Great.
Now she's turning off the lights. I mean, the whole thing is just insane. There's no, do you know that there's no real coffee here? Like, there is no
Uh,
real coffee here at this
yes.
station.
Yeah, I was at the office on Tuesday, and I know that for a fact. I'm coming in today again.
Where's the coffee
I mean,
machine? Like, what's going on, guys?
yeah, well, we slashed we slashed things back when lockdown hit, and we had to.
Now that we don't have to welcome visitors.
Yeah,
So now we know the coffee was actually for the visitors. It was never for us.
it was
We
never
were
for
just
us.
like we were just it's like, you know, when your parents have the nice cups and the nice
Yes,
plates and
yes,
the baker's choice assorted biscuits. Those are
yes.
not for you. But when the visitors come, you
Then suddenly,
also get
yeah, yeah. That's
it's
exactly what
like you
happened to
get
us.
the off cuts.
Definitely. No, that's
So the
100%
coffee
right.
is like that. It was so getting the coffee was actually just a byproduct of the fact that I see this. I see this.
And then she made the studio as cold as possible for you as well. That was another complaint. And you said when she set up the camera for this morning's show, she made sure that it looked right up your nose.
It was quite it was quite a thing. It was quite a thing. Like up my
Man,
nose, y'all.
that's so
Also,
great.
it
I'm
was
sorry.
so I do want you to know. So I was in KZN this week. I drove back home. I arrived
Yes.
last night at 10. Yesterday we were in Pietermaritzburg, but the day before we were in Ngutu.
Mutu, which is near
It's
it's
not,
near
it's not near anything.
no, but it's like in the middle of rural northern KwaZulu-Natal. It's like between Nongoma and Nkandla and
It-
those
it's actually between Ladysmith, Mnambiti, and
mm,
Ulundi. So if you come
yes,
through Ladysmith on your way to Ulundi, um, but it's not yeah,
in
Ngutu
in
is
that
in the
part
middle of nowhere.
in that part of KZN, don't you still need the king's permission to drive your car there? Like, if you get caught without his permission, don't they chase you out
Nope, Gil
with an
is not.
ikwa?
No, but this, so Gareth, you're gonna love this. In that area that we were in, there
Yeah.
are two things that I want to tell you about that you've probably never heard of. One is that there is actually a very large population of Basotho speaking people, and their chief is a
Yes.
Mosotho,
Oh.
Molefe,
Uh-huh.
and so this whole area, a big chunk of Ngutu, they are actually first language Basotho speakers.
Wow.
Mutaungs,
How long have
they
they
are
been how long have
Batlogwa
they been in that area? Because that's quite unusual.
for many many years. I think
Wow.
from the time of King Shaka already. So they have been there a long time, and they've kept all their traditions. So they have not been swallowed up by the Zulu people around them. They are Mutaungs, Mutloungs, um, Molefe, obviously. So they are Batlogwa, the people in that area, this and at this time of the year, as you may know, most
Mhm.
Basotho and Ndebele boys go into the mountain for initiation
Yes,
ceremonies.
correct. Yes, yes,
So,
yes.
so and Zulu people do not. Zulu people do not do mountain initiation ceremonies.
Yeah.
It was stopped in the time of King Shaka because he thought that it took time away for the young men that he needed in his regiments. So he said,
Correct.
"We're stopping this thing. I have another way to help you um, become men. You
Yeah,
must go
let's
out and
kill,
fight.
kill, kill, kill,
Go
kill.
out
Yeah,
and fight."
exactly.
and those boys are currently out in the mountains, so they've kept all of their rituals. They have kept their language. So when you are
And
in that area,
they choose to send them up at the coldest time of year, hey? Whew, into the
well,
mountains.
it's
God
the time
almighty.
to go. It's
I know,
the
but
time to
just
go because you're less likely to get infections that way,
'cause it's
which is
freezing.
unfortunately what happens in the Eastern Cape in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Is a lot of people get infections and die.
Yes, yes. Shaga he had foresight. He was a visionary.
And then the second thing I want to tell you about in Mutu is years ago, and I remember this when I was younger. There was a very, very famous what do you see? The English word is terrible because the English word is witch doctor, but it's not really a witch doctor. But
Yeah. Okay, I know
Nyanga,
what you mean. Yeah, Nyanga. Yeah.
Nyanga, right? A very famous one who was everybody knew about him, and his name is So Sobala. And you
That
may have
rings
heard this.
that rings a bell. But tell me who
He
this
used to
person
own
was.
a plane, right? He bought
Yes,
a
yes, 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 yes.
right.
Uh-huh. Like those
Traditional
charismatic
healer.
pastors.
Thank you,
Yeah.
rebellious Ruth. Traditional
Mhm,
healer.
mhm.
Um, and so and we drove around with Undunankulu in the area. So there's Mulefe is the chief, and there are 19 Indunas under him. And
Right.
in the hierarchy, right? So Induna is like middle management,
Yeah.
and the executive management is Dunankulu. And we drove around, and he was showing us around, and he showed us Sosobala's house,
Mm.
which is still standing all these many years later after his death. And it's like a triple story. It's huge. It's
Yeah.
it's not even a double story. It's like 3 stories high. And and he told us that his whole thing that Sosobala used to tell them is he it must be seen how powerful he is. And what he actually wants, and the Zulu phrase for it is he wants to urinate on the heads of his neighbors. That's why he must be so far
So
above
that's
them.
right. So Sobala Mbata.
Mbata.
Yeah.
Yebo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It-
No, he was well known. I remember his whole story. Yes, man. That 3-story house, I've even got a picture of it for you. Hang on. This is quite cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this is real. This is the real thing. So Sobala, he lived in this massive house, and didn't he have like they found all these they found a safe full of money and gold and
Full of
stuff when he
and he
died.
was not
Yeah,
he was not he wasn't uh Western educated. So he
yeah. No,
was, by all intents, he was illiterate. And here
yeah.
he was, private jet out in the 80s. Apparently, that house now, his daughter, who is still alive, is renting out to a whole lot of Chinese people who have shops in the.
Yeah, so Sobala, they found all that money in his safe. I remember that. That was a big story. And the plane. I remember the story about the plane. He had his
Yeah.
own like DC plane.
So that's become like a compound for all the Chinese people that own shops in the nearby mall.
That's right.
These
That's
are the
right.
adventures of Phumi Mashego in KZN
Well,
this week.
I mean, listen, Booms, that sounds amazing. You see, that's the kind of stuff I would love to do, like a road trip around. No, seriously, I've told you before, and I said to Muzi Kuzwayo the last time we had him in the studio, I was like, please, I want to do a trip through KwaZulu-Natal with Muzi because he knows the history as well as I do, if not better. He can introduce he can introduce me to all of these amazing people who have the oral tradition, who are able to tell the stories. And of
Oh,
course,
it is
with the
fantastic.
benefit of taking you along is you can actually understand the high ancient Zulu that they speak in some of these places. So we'll be able
No
to
one speaks a high
we'll be able to
Zulu.
figure out what's going on.
So but I will brag about this a little bit. We also stopped by in Clones, which is a little village outside Dundee, where we've
Yeah.
got a project putting up water, a water pump and tanks for the community.
Yes.
And that is progressing relatively well. So within a month or so, there's going to be clean running water
Oh
for a
wow.
village of about 2,000 people, and
Well, you
we
see,
were
when people say, "Ah, the burning platform is just a talk shop," and you know, you say every
we
week,
do cool things. We do cool things. We
every
do
week
cool
you
things.
say, it's up to us. We've got to stand up and be counted. We've got to do it for ourselves. We're the leaders we've been waiting for. And you know, a lot of people will cynically say, "Oh, yeah, that's all. Pumi's just saying the right thing," but you're actually out there doing this, and that's part of your it's part of your business. It's part of what you and Muzi are doing at the moment, which I think is so great.
It is very cool. And we were offline, obviously, because there's not great reception all
Oh
in
yeah,
those deep rural parts. And so yesterday, when I got back to Joburg and turned on my Twitter, blowing
yeah.
up with Ian Cameron, who
Wow,
is
did you
this
see that?
hero without a cape?
But we love this guy because he just stood up to Becky Cele. Let's just do you want to save it for the burning platform, or do you want to do it now?
Okay,
Because
let's save it for the burning
yeah, let's
platform.
save it. I mean, I'll get the video and make sure that we can watch it from beginning to end. Because I also only saw little bits and pieces. This guy basically stood up at a meeting in the Western Cape and accused the police minister, quite rightly, of ignoring the Western Cape's plight on purpose because he doesn't care about gangsterism. He doesn't care about drugs and crime and murder in the Western Cape. He wants it to be as bad as possible because the national government and the National Police Commissioner have no interest in maintaining law and order in the Western Cape. They don't want to devolve it upon the provinces. That would mean they would be giving up some of their own power. And this guy, basically, this dude, ordinary member of the community, I think he represents
He's, I, yeah, and I think
some
he's
small
part of
party
the
or action
CPF.
group. Yeah, and you know what? Those are the groups that will make a difference. I mean, we've got a local neighborhood like WhatsApp group, which sometimes hate being on because you know there are lots of people who
Because
just talk
WhatsApp.
shit. Yeah, but I think about it and I think, well, that is because people use the word community, and this is something I spoke about with Ben last Friday. People use that word community way too much, and they use it for all the wrong reasons. They're like, we are the community. Community needs this. The community desires and demands this. The community represented by those words often are misplaced. But the real community is when you belong to a group of people and you all actively participate in things that happen within that community, the good things, the bad things. Stand up for yourselves. You represent yourselves as a group before the people who are meant to take care of basic infrastructure, service delivery needs, all of that stuff. It doesn't happen very often, but I like the fact that all over South Africa, people are making these little connections and they're getting things done. And they're not tolerating crap from the politicians like they used to, because we were a very cowed society. I think you'd agree with me, Phumi. Whether you were black
Yeah.
or white, English or Afrikaans or Zulu or Tswana or Sotho or whatever, we used to be very um, obedient people in this country. We used to be people who would do what we were told. We
I don't
would
think we were
we would
obedient. I think we were
well,
brutalized.
yeah, that's probably true too. But I think there was a certain amount of like craven kind of respect for authority, and it was inculcated into us as young children. It still is in many places. You know, you must respect your elders. If someone is an office bearer of some kind, just by virtue of the fact that they bear that office, they must have your respect, and you shouldn't argue with them, and you certainly shouldn't mock and ridicule them. I think mostly disappearing now, and I think it's a good thing because too many people have lorded it over us for generations based on the fact that we must just automatically respect them. You know, those old NP guys with the hats on, then the ANC guys with their fingers in the till, and everybody in between. The people who were, you know, in the army or the air force or the navy, or they were telling us what to do in the streets with police uniforms on. Those people must back down now. The ordinary citizens are standing up, and they won't take this anymore.
So another thing that I was a part of, which is a very fascinating conversation dialogue. I think that's what they're calling it. It's convened by Professor Nick Bernardell.
Oh yes,
He started Gibbs, and
yes.
he had one about 3 weeks ago, about a month ago. He had the first one, which to which he invited Lord Peter Hain. We had him on the
Yes.
show on the Burning
Yes, that's
platform
right.
as well, which was an incredible group of people, older people with lots of diverse experience in both in private sector, in public sector, in academia, a really fantastic group of people. And he had the second one. Oh, an embarrassing thing happened to me. So it was a Zoom meeting. I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure how I ended up being invited to this thing. And I got on the Zoom. I was at the office and I turned on my Zoom and I was still busy doing stuff and I was a little bit early.
Mhm.
And I left the boardroom, which is where I was gonna be for the session. I left the boardroom and everybody kept coming into the room as I went to make coffee because we actually have coffee at our office.
Yes.
And when I came back into the room,
Thanks. I heard that subtle dig, but okay. Yeah.
when I came back into the room, all of the various people on screen were coming on. And I looked over, and as I was closing the door, and I looked over, and there were all these old white guys.
Oh wow. What?
And I thought my screen was off, and I thought my thing was on mute. And I don't know why, but out loud, I was just like, oh my goodness, so many old white guys.
So what did
I
they
was
say?
horrified. So Nick says, who is that?
Oh boy.
And I turned on my camera and I said to Nick, hi, I'm Phumi. You may not remember me. You must always reintroduce yourself to old people.
Of course, yeah.
It's always the duty of the young to remind the old people who they are. So I reintroduce myself to Nick and I say to him, but listen, guys, I really, I'm horrified that we have this forum here and there's no diversity. We're all gonna, it's you and your friends. What are what conversation are you going to have that you haven't had in the past 20 years if it's only you guys? We need other voices and we need different people in the platform so we can hear other people's experiences and ideas, because that's really what we need. If we're going to change things in this country, if we're going to change ourselves, we need different perspectives. He took
Right.
that. He was
Right.
gracious and he took that. He was like, yeah, he gets it. We were gonna invite more. He was gonna invite a more diverse crowd. It was horrendous. I was the only black woman.
Yeah, I think there's so much
So
window
Michelle
dressing.
Faster,
There's
Michelle
so much
is
yeah,
Michelle Michael. Michael says if it
Michael.
would if it would
If it
reverse,
was
wouldn't it be
reversed,
racist? I absolutely don't think so. For the same reason that I think if we're going to change things, we need to hear different perspectives. We need to hear young voices. We need to hear old voices. We need to hear men and women and blacks and whites. We need to, and Indians and coloreds and Chinese and everybody, because the perspectives are important in order to move forward. If we only have a single conversation amongst ourselves, then we don't see anything different and we don't see how we can change what we're doing.
Yeah, I just think that this idea, and I totally agree with you that we will miss out on perspectives. We aren't when you don't have a representative crowd, you don't have everyone's buy-in, and all of that's massively important. But I do think that this idea of diversity and inclusion, those two words, it's become like a religion especially in corporate South Africa and all over the world, in fact, because people are so interested in representation rather than actually having a good reason for some people to be there and other reasons for people to be there that are not good reasons. And we can debate that. But there's huge amounts of window dressing that still goes on in corporate South Africa. We
Absolutely. And it's awful.
all know that in order to tick those boxes that you just alerted those men to, there are also people who will bend over backwards to just have black women all over the place, even though they don't allow those black women to make any decisions. They really are just there as window dressing. They don't make a meaningful contribution. And it's just bullshit. It feels so fake. And I think we've got to a point now where a lot of this stuff rings hollow. even though
Of
there is
of course,
there's an enormous there's an
if you
enormous amount of
manipulate the situation,
progress
Gareth,
we've made. Yeah.
so, there's a difference between genuinely wanting to hear different people and different things, right? And then there is also wanting to tick boxes and keep everything the same. Therefore,
Mm.
the people you invite into the space are people you can manipulate or people
Yeah.
will not contribute. So those two things, and again, the intentions of people are always,
Well,
self-serving in a lot of ways. But a fascinating thing I saw and heard from Professor Marwala, actually, who's at UJ, about
mhm,
diversity. And he is, I if you don't know who he is the the head of UJ, and he is one of the top specialists in AI development, not just in South Africa or Africa, but the world.
I think I've
And
spoken to him on the show. I
and
didn't know him.
he talks about computer human systems, obviously because of AI, right? Because artificial intelligence is trained by humans.
Right.
And it was in a paper, I think, in MIT, that the most diverse systems that include computers and humans and different types of humans are the most adept at innovating and coming up with new things, right? Why you need, because computers on their own, a system with computers on its own, then only has the biases of the people that program it. But if you have computers programmed by various people, different fields, so not just different, diversity is also not just about race and gender. Diversity is also about industry sectors, right? So you have artists, designers, engineers, but all that is diversity. So lots of different types of people from different areas with different perspectives. You're able to then design computer systems that are far more innovative and can generate different
Yeah.
ideas.
No, you have to be able to prove that, because diversity just for its own sake doesn't necessarily make anything better. We've seen this too. A lot of people go, "Oh, we need diversity and inclusion," and then what you do is you just end up filling the room with a whole bunch of people who actually are like-minded without being diverse.
Yeah,
Diversity. What we really need is
absolutely.
diversity of thought, not just of appearance. There are a lot of people again who tick these boxes, and every fucking company in South Africa is falling over themselves to show how inclusive and how diverse they are. And I say, so what? If it isn't actually
And
contributing
then
to your business,
if you have 10 accountants, you're not diverse.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, I'm not that interested in diversity for diversity's sake. I think it has to result in different perspectives, like you mentioned, Phumi. It has to result in a way of seeing the world from different points of view, so you don't miss anything. And that's where it does have value. And I think companies that don't have a good spread of people from all corners of at least this country and perhaps the globe are missing out, because they will not see the marketing opportunities. They will not understand the way of thinking of different people from different places and different backgrounds. But for its own sake, just so that you can show a United Colors of Benetton picture on your board pack, I think that's ridiculous. And I think we've all seen through that. And in South Africa at this stage, there are way too many people who are still doing it. They're like diversity and inclusion, and then when you see what's actually happening, still three people who are making all the decisions. The rest are all just sitting there, being paid to attend the biannual board meeting, and they're not doing anything. We've got, there's the one white guy, black guy, or Indian woman who's like making all the calls, and then the rest of them are just sitting there like lummoxes, and it's embarrassing. And for those people to allow themselves to be used like that is embarrassing, first of all. For the company to be doing it and thinking they can get away with it is outrageous. And I think that it's become almost like a religious dogma. You know how you have sacraments in religions? You have, you know, um,
Yes.
Holy Communion, and if you're Catholic, you have to attend Mass, and there are certain high and holy days, and all of that stuff. Well, diversity and inclusion has become like a religion in corporate South Africa. People go through these rituals, oh man, and they bow in front of the altar of this, and they tick the boxes, and they have their HR department go through all the processes, and then they sit in their board and they kind of look around and they go, oh, well, what we really need is more black women because then we'll be able to get more government tenders. But they're not doing it because they actually want black women there. And I
And
just feel
that's so this is the thing that I'm saying, that diversity is not just about it's about truly wanting to hear different perspectives. So you speak
yeah,
about board meetings, for instance. One of the things that I have seen in corporate South Africa is exactly that. We want to get more Chinese, Indian, colored, black people, all of
that's
that in our board meeting, in our boardroom and on our board. But what they end up having is they end up having 10 accountants who just have different colored skin.
right.
That is not diversity,
Or
right?
or they
Or
have like
10
they have,
politicians with
yeah,
different.
precisely. I mean, the thing
That
we
is
have in
not
this,
diversity.
we end up with like 10 people who used to be in the ANC but have been thrown out of ANC structures and now are looking for a way to influence things from the outside. These companies are still hoping to curry favor with the government. And then they'll hire these old ANC cadres who all think the same way, who none of them, I mean, you and I could walk diversity circles around these people with our eyes closed because we would know different opinions if we saw them. These guys all have exactly the same old, like 1970s Russian Stalinist take on how the country should be governed and how business works. They don't add any value in those boards. They're a waste of time.
I'd love
Absolute
to
waste.
see more creative people in boards. I'd love to see more
Yeah,
kind
that
of
is such a good point because Phumi, you and
designers
I
and
both
marketers.
we both work and have worked in various creative industries. And you're right about this accountant thing. That drives me crazy because the minute you bring the accountants in,
All
and
they
listen,
do is count.
we need accountants, but they have no capacity. Very few of them. Let me be fair, because there are accountants who are creative, and I don't mean in a a tax dodging way. I mean there are accountants who think differently to the way that that it's just about making the books balance. There are accountants who think about putting money aside to do really amazing and interesting things, to do research and development, um, to do stuff that builds people, to really change the way companies work. And then there are accountants who just streamline, cut expenses. They come in
And they're going to, those
like
accountants are
asset
going to be
strippers.
replaced by AI.
Well, yes, and I think a lot of this diversity and inclusion shit will be replaced by AI too, because even though what you said is true, that the human factor is important, so much of what humans think is diverse and interesting is actually just them unloading their psychological bullshit into places where it doesn't belong. And I think machines will ultimately help us do less of that me, pay attention to me. I also want some attention. I also want to be important kind of nonsense that humans are always prone to. So, I mean, we're getting there. But I do feel like South Africa has, although we've become in so many ways open, more authentic, more real, we've stopped just listening to authority, as I said at the beginning of this little diatribe. But there's a huge corporate religion of diversity and inclusion that has metastasized like a cancer, and it does no good. These companies are so busy squaring the circle and jumping through hoops to try and be as diverse and inclusionary as they possibly can that they have forgotten the business that they're in, making sandwiches or fixing walls. Now it's become all about how you appear rather than what you do. And I don't think that we're a country that can afford that anymore. There are hungry, desperate, unemployed people. Some of them are very talented people. They maybe never got given the opportunity to excel in any particular area. Maybe they've been sidelined. But we keep talking diversity and inclusion. What we really have done in this country, we've enriched at no cost to themselves a cadre, a cohort of politically connected people whose loyalty isn't necessarily to productivity, to for-profit organizations, to making a difference in the country, to creating value. Their loyalty is to politics, and this cohort of people have become immensely rich and powerful. We know who they are. Our president is one of them. They've become immensely rich and powerful at the expense of actual growth and development and productivity and profitability and a country moving in a forward direction rather than a backward one. We know who these people are. And they all go around saying, "Oh, I'm on the board. It's diversity and inclusion." It isn't. You and your friends in politics have ruined business in this country. And the old white companies that did this, that allowed this to happen, that didn't just allow it, that encouraged this to happen and took advantage of this situation and got their
payout
black, and got their black representative in and just gave them money to just sit there. Instead of actually growing someone from the ground up and finding real talent and helping young black people to forge a path for themselves. Those people are
Gareth, all that hard work you're expecting people to do.
I'm sick because I see such talent and possibility and opportunity in this country. And I see so many people who have unreal abilities, but no one's ever taken the trouble because it's much easier to just hire Tokyo or Cyril or someone else onto your board, pay them a shit ton of money like they've been paid by 25 other companies, and they sit there and they and they chuckle and they glad hand, and everybody gets paid a dividend, and nobody grows the average young talented black entrepreneur. Nobody puts any effort into them. They can't get funding. They can't get a leg up. It's big supplies from big companies instead of small suppliers in small places. We're
it's
never
a
going to
lot
grow.
of hard work. It's a lot of hard work on both sides. It's a lot of hard work on the person that is extending themselves to assist and get not just young people, but different types of people to grow in whatever industry sector they're
Right.
in. It is a lot of hard work on the side of the person who is receiving all of this attention and help and
sometimes it's too much effort.
it's on both sides.
No.
On both
Well,
sides of the scale,
so
it is a lot of hard work.
Here's a good point made by DK. South Africa is full of oligarchs. Remember, those exiled were trained by the championship country of oligarchs. Yeah, that's correct. And they were especially paying attention during the Boris Yeltsin administration, when Russia was fleeced just like South Africa has been fleeced. They all come from the same university of corruption. Let's not forget that. Congo Chris says the diversity legislation created the infrastructure for that corruption and nepotism, Gareth. You know it, I know it, and Phumi knows it. No amount of blaming old white dudes will fix that. Yeah, but they played a role. And we're not just blaming them so we can pass the buck, because it's our problem now. A lot of those guys are dead. A lot of those companies that said, what we'll do is we'll just give X amount of the company away, and then we can get into government's pockets.
And we started out the show talking about Lord Peter Hain. This has always been the thing, is all of those consultants that came here from McKinsey and Bain and with all of these grand plans of how this could work are also part of what's gone wrong. And I think it's important to know what's gone wrong so that we can figure out how not to do that again. It's important. Looking back and thinking at what's gone wrong.
I'll tell you, we've got to a point, though, in this country where actually I don't give two shits about diversity and inclusion as long as someone can make things work, and especially in places like Eskom. Now, I don't know that this Andre de Ruyter is impressive. Someone tried to defend him to me the other day. I'm not
Gareth,
with him. If you could find you find a colored woman in a wheelchair who could do a better job than him, and I wouldn't be surprised if any colored woman in a wheelchair could, then put her in. Because I'm not interested in whether Andre de Ruyter is white or male. It doesn't bother me in the least. I want someone who, when I switch on the fucking lights, they come on. I don't give two damns about the politics of Eskom. In fact, the politics of Eskom is what has got us to this situation, and an obsession with
Gareth,
not only.
I love it when you come back full circle. I remember saying to you guys, Andre de Ruyter fucked up Nampak.
Yes. And how did he get in? Because he's politically connected. He's in that same cohort of people who just moves around corporate South Africa, never ever being held accountable for their fuck ups. I'm sorry. I'm totally with you.
I love it. I remember having this conversation. In fact, I think I was exactly here in the studio with you and Catherine. I said, that man fucked up. he fucked up where he's
And
been. If just looking at his corporate history, I
I
don't
have
know
not
if he's gonna
I
be
have
the
not
person to
disagreed with
turn
you.
this thing around.
I didn't disagree with you about him. I
No,
didn't
you did
disagree
not.
with you about Cyril, and there are so many of these useless parasitic people who are hanging around on the infrastructure of this country and sucking it dry. And I'm sorry, I'm done with it now. Find me someone who's prepared to put in the work. Find me someone who's not beholden to politicians and put that person in charge of Eskom. And I think we will make more progress. Find someone who is willing to go around to power stations and arrest, on the ground, arrest people who are getting in the way of the ordinary South African getting the basic dignity. We talk about human rights and dignity, the basic dignity of having water and electricity to wash, to cook. That's what we need. Forget about this, the Bill of Human Rights at the front of our Constitution. If you're not going to provide people with water and electricity, what is the point of a government if you can't do that stuff? Seriously, it's enough already. Anyway, no one will excel under the ANC government. Well, listen, I think they are in for a major hiding at the next election. And I've never seen so much anger. We talk about like how angry we are on the show, and oh, we didn't get our lights this week, or we couldn't make our meal last night until 10 o'clock, which was the case for me. But so what? Those are not the biggest problems in the world. Ordinary people at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum in this country who are desperate. Those people, let me tell you, are so angry at the moment. They have nothing to lose. You got to watch out if you're a politician. Things are going to get very ugly. I saw Ekurhuleni yesterday. There were protests all over Ekurhuleni. People are like, we've had it up to here. There were service delivery protests. I saw the people of Makobo were up in arms because their mayor went to the Durban July and spent 700,000 on booze and women and parties. Now, I wouldn't be sleeping so easy if I were the mayor of Makondo at the moment, because I'll tell you what, the people of that town are gutful, and they're going to pull him out of his house if he's not careful and drag him down the street.
Really? Whoa.
Mm-hmm. Go to the Durban July. Spent 700,000 rand on booze. Congo Chris says, and fuck Becky Cele and his stupid clown hat. Yeah, that's true. We'll play that just now. That guy, you see how insecure these guys are, hey? Becky Cele, he's the one who's been going around like a big taxi bus saying to everybody, we will shoot to kill. You remember all that stuff. We know how to run this country. The police have got things under control. You must go to, remember during the lockdown when he said you must be in bed by 9 o'clock talking to us like children. Well, it took one guy at a community policing forum meeting to make this,
so there were
to rattle Becky Cele to the point where he was stumbling, stuttering, falling down, trying his best, calling up the race car, doing whatever he could, and none of it worked. The people at that meeting were not interested in him.
Remember about 3 weeks ago, there was a march by Soweto residents to the city of Joburg offices in Braamfontein to see Mpho Phalatse. And pardon me, there was a very funny video of a guy one of the Vox Pops that I think it was on Newsroom Africa. And they spoke to one of the people who was marching to say, oh, so where are you from? And he was from Pimville. And probably about 2 weeks prior to that, Bheki Cele had come to Pimville because one of the Dudula people had been shot and killed, and it had become a bit of a keg over there. And so they asked this guy, so what happened after the minister came and what's happened now? That guy, I wish I could find the video for you, and hopefully I'll try and find it and tweet it a little bit later. But this guy you could see his face change as the interviewer said, so the minister was there. What has since happened in the community? This guy says, oh, Bheki Cele the liar. Bheki Cele the
liar. Oh, man. Yeah.
Bheki Cele the liar, he says. That video was so perfect. And I think it was just, it's just been rolling downhill for Cele since then, because
Yeah.
and it shows, they're under a lot of pressure. When you see these kind of outbursts, it's the pressure has gotten to them. The pressure has mounted and has gotten to them, and they're unable to to hold it together.
That's it. They're falling apart under the pressure, which is great because it's about time that they realize that they are shit at everything they do. They're just absolutely useless at everything they do, and nobody's going to take them seriously anymore. Not as politicians, not as we wouldn't hire. Listen, would you give a job, Phumi, to any single one of those cabinet ministers in your own business? I very much doubt it. I very much doubt any of Cyril's cabinet would be any good at helping your business to go in any direction but down.
We
And
do actual work at our company.
correct. And I do remember a time when we had competent ministers in this country. We did have people, and we were we were reminiscing on the show just a couple of days ago about the Thabo Mbeki era where we had growth of 6%. You remember? I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but my God, what we wouldn't do for that right now. Where we had a surplus, a budget surplus, where we were actually respected by the international community. We had people. We used to have a department of international relations that actually would speak sometimes and people would sometimes listen. Not now, right? We had some
Yeah.
clout. We've had nothing but damage to our reputation since, I don't know, probably the end of the World Cup in 2010. Nothing but damage to our reputation. Nothing but embarrassment.
What's in the news? What's in the news?
Let's do it. Let's do it. So Zim is going to introduce gold coins as the local currency has tumbled. This is unbelievable. I was reading a book about English history, and they once ransomed and kidnapped the French king during the reign of King Edward III. This is about the late 1300s. And when they ransomed and kidnapped the French king, in order to pay for his ransom, the French introduced a gold coin for the first time, a new gold sovereign, which they needed in order to prop up their failing economy. And that was in the 1300s in France. But here it is in 2022 happening right across our border. Zimbabwe's central bank said it would start selling gold coins this month as a store of value to tame runaway inflation, which has considerably weakened the local currency. The central bank governor said in a statement on Monday the coins will be available for sale from the 25th of July in local currency US dollars and other foreign currencies at a price based on the prevailing international price of gold. The Mosuatunya coin, which has been named after the Victoria Falls, can be converted into cash or be traded locally and internationally. So Zimbabwe is going back to the prehistoric era of actually paying for things in gold. I wonder if it would be worth us going over the border to buy gold coins from them and bring them back to South Africa, whether we can just use them as a store of currency here. I wonder. Anyway, that's happening.
I shake my head at that.
That's embarrassing.
Anyway.
It's terrible. So there's another failure, is our northern neighbor. Just absolute disaster piled upon disaster in poor Zimbabwe. And this is why we've got so many Zimbabweans living in South Africa hoping to make a difference, hoping to be able to actually feed themselves, put themselves up in a house that doesn't leak, have water. Well, you've come to the wrong place, Zimbabweans, because we don't have electricity for you, I'm afraid. Anyway, speaking of that, Eskom on Tuesday said the conclusion of a new wage deal with workers did not mean load shedding would immediately come to an end. Oh, we were under the impression that after these wage negotiations were concluded, we'd have power again and things would work. Oh, the utility had for weeks blamed the rolling frequent power cuts on labor unrest. However, the relief South Africans have been hoping for will not come immediately. At a cost of 1 billion rand, Eskom has concluded a wage agreement with workers, which will see them earning 7% more, among other adjustments. Why? Somebody explain to me why we need to pay Eskom workers 7% more. When one of the reasons we have inflation, one of the reasons things cost more, one of the reasons this economy is failing is because Eskom can't do its job. Personal accountability is kind of a big part of being alive and being human. And most of the bad things that happen to you are because of you. And in this country, it seems to me really unfair that we have to deal with that reality, but we also have to deal with the reality that most of the bad things that happen to us as a country are because of Eskom. And we didn't deserve that. That wasn't us. We didn't mismanage that place into the ground. Eskom's head of human resources, LC Pule, said that the agreement would help lift some of the pressure from the maintenance backlog, but the effects won't be immediate. It's going to take a lot to bring back some of the units, and we believe it will contribute to stabilizing our operations. NUMSA's Irvin Jim, who this guy, I can't believe anyone takes him seriously, said the power crisis had nothing to do with workers. Huh. We think Eskom must take full responsibility. We understand that the public has been subjected to this. There's been load shedding before. Now, Irvin, we would believe you if you hadn't lied on every other front before this. You don't
They
seem to
did
understand
get
either.
they did get very uppity last week, the unions, about the wage negotiations and the wage deal. I don't know if you saw this, but for real Hafaji. And initially it was a story that was reported by EWN about the quantum, the average pay of Eskom workers. This was
So
an EWN story.
Third best place to work on average salaries in South Africa. Average
And
salary of one of the 43,000 Eskom employees, the average salary inside of Eskom for those 43,000 employees is about 61,000 rand. Average.
So here's the thing, right? And this is where maths let down a lot of people when this conversation was being had, because there are different ways of working this out, right? You could work out average, or you could work out the mean, meaning which is not an average, but the quantum in various bands, and the highest band of people, which is what you actually need. So the kind of the large number of workers who are, they are the boiler makers and the maintenance guys and the this and the this, and an average always gets distorted by what is the highest, what is the lowest, about the number and all of that. No, Matslet Twitter went insane, and for real was actually had to retract her statement and delete her tweet, because NUMSA went and their bots went apeshit on her.
So what? I always say, so what? If it happens in Twitter, that doesn't mean it's happening in the real world. I think that's weakness on the part of Beryl Hafaji. She shouldn't have withdrawn her tweet. And we shouldn't bow to pressure on social media from a bunch of people who can't do simple addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. Outrageous. Anyway, listen to this. I have a friend who works at Eskom, Exdom, says Yonda, and has not had a raise in 7 years. I'm not sure. I would consider this across the board. So I'm conflicted about the increase if it's the first time across the board. Well, I'll tell you what. When people go and they investigate and they dig a little deeper here, we find all kinds of things. We found out that Andre de Ruyter is getting 5 million rand a year as his salary there for not fixing Eskom. Because people are saying, oh, no, but he's doing as good a job as it's possible to do. And, there are people making excuses for him. They've apparently knocked 9 billion off of their debt, which is great. That's admirable. But the lights are still not on. So all I care about is the result. I'm not interested in your process or diversity and inclusion or the average salary or NUMSA. When I press the button on my wall, does the light come on? If it doesn't, I'm going to stop using your product and I'm going to get off the grid, which I'm doing at the moment. And I'm not going to use you anymore. And you're not going to get a single cent of my money. It's not just me, by the way. Lots of people will be doing this. And the ones who can't afford it will eventually just not have electricity because Eskom can't provide to them anymore. That's how it's going to go. The ANC necklaced their way into power, says G-Star, blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's we don't need to go down that path because that's not entirely true. The ANC won legitimately a number of elections, and the people of this country have voted for them substantially and in great numbers since. Those numbers have been declining, but you cannot say that they necklaced their way into power. That's just not true, G-Star. And you can get angry about it and you can say things about the ANC, but we can't start lying about what actually happened in the past. Of course, there were people who were badly behaved in the ANC. There were people who were imprisoned. There were people who killed people, but there were people in all the parties that did that. And if we're going to start attributing blame to our past for our current scenario, then how far back do you go? And exactly where do you stop looking for excuses in the past and start looking for answers in the future? I don't believe that's helpful to us. Yeah, I agree on what you're saying, Gareth. Not sure how this was as yet. the high bands were overpaid, and not sure the middle and juniors were paid well enough as well. Well, the problem in this country is also um, you get this incredible privilege that's afforded to people in upper management, and their demands are taken a lot more seriously because we believe that organizations wouldn't work without upper management, and that's largely true. But the middle and the lower end of every company, if those people aren't paid properly, nothing works. Do you agree, Phumi? We seem to give a free
Mm.
pass to the people on the top end of any organization. When they demand things, they get them. I don't know. I
It's
don't know where they come from.
this the stacking up, right? The stacking up of who does more, and this happens almost annually when various people want increases, or when people's performance bonuses get um,
Yeah.
reported on. It happened
Yep.
about a month ago, also about a month ago with Neil Froneman, and which was not a performance bonus, but actually share options. Neil Froneman, Sibanye Gold,
Right.
CEO of Sibanye Gold, Sibanye Stillwater, which is gold and platinum, actually, because they've been on a huge acquisition drive in the platinum belt.
Right.
And his share options, past bonuses and performance bonuses, I think eventually came up to something like 300 million.
Well, he has taken Sibanye from a company that was a tiny single mine gold operation to a massive international platinum and gold operation with many mines all
Mhm.
across the world, not just in South Africa. And he's the one who's taken the risk with his own money to make that happen. So, you could argue this is a private company. There are shareholders. The shareholders approve these things. If the shareholders don't approve it, then that person doesn't get those bonuses. In his
And when
case,
that information was reported on, it was also at a time when Sibanye Stillwater was in
with
a
strike.
negotiation cycle with workers, I think in their platinum businesses. And these wage negotiations, are in cycles. It's you
Mm.
sign a wage agreement, even with the Eskom wage agreement, I think is for 3 to 5 years, which is why the number looks so big as well, because it includes the increases over the next couple of years. But accountants and their
Accountants,
magic.
yeah, exactly. So
Accountants and their magic.
I'll show you how this should work. Congo Chris says, I'm going on strike until Gareth gives the comment section a 7% increase. 7% of zero is still zero, but it's the thought that counts.
Congo, you've
uh,
got your 7%. You've got your
there we go.
7%.
7% of zero. Go for it. It's all yours. Now you're happy. So according to TP, Eskom is re-employing the previous employees that were let go. Yeah. Again, this is not how it works. There has to be consequence and there has to be accountability. If you went on strike and you cost the South African public huge amounts of money, you cost the economy, you cost some gogo her meat in her freezer, you know what? You don't get to shout and scream about your job and a 7% increase. In fact, there's a very good argument that you should be held in contempt of the country. You should be accused of treason for doing this to the people of South Africa, and maybe we should be arresting people on that basis. You work in a parastatal where there's an
Woo!
emergency.
Arresting people. Gareth.
Imagine,
Arresting
imagine.
people. Imagine if people got arrested. What's that? There's a headline there, something about the NPA and people being arrested
Yeah,
following
sure,
the
of course,
state capture report.
not a chance. We know all about that. We've spoken about that ad infinitum. We're blue in the face from talking about that. All right, but speaking of stuff in the news, we've got the burning platform coming up next, and we're going to be joined by one of our recurring champions, someone called Leeto Nthoba, who you know very well. He's a lecturer at the Central University of Technology. He's also a debater and a socio-political analyst. We love talking to Leeto. He's got some interesting insights every single time we see him. So we'll be talking a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the news. And we want to hear from you. If there's something you would like us to address, please give us a shout. We want to hear about it. Booms, you wanted to say something before I brought that up?
I wanted to say about arrests, right? I was to say
Yeah.
about arrests. I have seen quite a, is it worrying? I think it should be worrying trend over the last couple of weeks. There have been a number of people, including Hamilton Ndlovu, who've been
Yeah.
found guilty of the PPE fraud tender
Yes.
fraud. And instead of being arrested and going to prison, which I think almost everybody would rather prefer, he's being asked to pay back their money. So I want
Ooh.
him to pay back the money and go to prison. Because,
Yes, I
like,
think both. Yeah,
do people
both.
not go to prison anymore? So,
Absolutely both.
and I think I saw 3 cases in the past 2 weeks of people who are expected to pay back the money. In fact, I think in the Sunday Times 2 weeks ago, somebody else was asked to pay back the money, and he's just going, "I don't have the money." I'm going, "So why isn't he in prison? I want the money back, and I want him in prison."
Yeah, I agree with you.
That's what I
Both.
want.
Yeah.
Isn't that what?
Absolutely. A lot of people talking about Paul O'Sullivan, and he's got a new book out. So we'll see if we can't get him on at some point in the future on the Burning platform. But we've got lots of people lined up. I promise you, the producers are working day and night to try and find us the best guests for the Burning platform. And we will be joined by one such guest in just a little bit. Stick around, cliffcentral.com. It is Thursday morning. Phumi Mashiko's here, Gareth, Cliff, and you, most importantly, as a part of what makes our Thursdays a more serious day, a day where we take things a little more seriously, but we're not serious people all the time, as you've heard if you've listened to the show for more than 5 minutes. All of that and more on the way next.
Up next in the Autotrader podcast.
I recently received a few videos for the last, I think about 3 weeks now, of people saying, if you add this thing to your vehicle, specifically once you're pouring gas, you pour this fluid into your fuel tank, you may get some additional mileage.
Yeah, I'm not sure I believe in them. And I'll give you the reasons just now.
Okay, so there are proven additives that do work.
Catch us every Monday at 9 a.m. on YouTube and on autotrader.co.za.
All right, it is time for the Burning Platform, which is this morning with Leeto Nthoba. Leeto, it's nice to see you, man. How are you?
Morning, guys. I'm good, and yourself?
Good.
Hello.
We've been excited to see you. It's been a little while.
Yes.
First of all, how bad is it in Welkom as compared to everywhere else when the water doesn't work? I mean, the electricity doesn't work and the water doesn't work, because we know you have problems with both.
So in the township, when load shedding comes, so let's assume like there's 2 hours. There's a 2 hour difference. In the township, it goes for like 4 to 6 hours at times. There's a neighborhood called Bronville where all the colored people were placed, and at times they haven't had electricity for like 4 or 5 days in a row. So it's that bad. And at times there's no water. Like if you go to Bronville now, the water pressure is nothing. Like you have to wait like an hour for your bath to fill up so that you can take a bath. So
I knew you'd have a horrible story for us, because we always start talking to you about the horrible stories of what goes on in a place like Welkom. I mean, is anything on the improvement track there? Because we know a lot of people just want to get out. Last time we spoke to you, you pretty much said you're going to give up on the place, even though you've been trying. You've got students you've been trying to help. This is your community. You've been trying to make a difference. We know that you've been putting in a lot of effort. Behind the scenes, you probably do even more than you could talk about. But is there a reason to stick around? Has anything got better? Are there politicians being held accountable? I mean, am I talking nonsense here? Am I just hoping against hope?
This is what we do, right, as South Africans. We're always hoping for something, hoping about anything, right? But in this place, like, you know, when I started to think that maybe ACE was better than the people who were here, that's when I thought, yeah, everything has gone down the toilet. Because I think if you watch Carte Blanche like a week or two ago, they were talking about the roads in the Free State. They literally had a convoy of nice big cars go and see what potholes are there and say, we promised to fix these potholes. When you could just go and fix the potholes.
Fikile Mbalula was there, wasn't he?
Yes, and then somebody from the presidency was here, and they had a big convoy to go hand over one house in Allen Ridge. One house. So,
but he did also say, Cyril Ramaphosa, a week and a half ago at a I don't remember where he was presenting, but at least he was awake, unlike yesterday at the. But I digress. He did say, though, that, you know, that Eskom should stop being discriminatory with load shedding schedules. The load shedding should be across the board.
Townships are bearing an unequal amount of the weight when it comes to load shedding. And he was doing this. Now, I, first of all, don't believe that anyone in the townships is stupid enough to swallow up these platitudes. You can tell he's only saying this because he's trying to curry favor with poor people and make it sound like someone else is victimizing them. Meanwhile, we know the whole reason any of this is going on is because his government's so cuck at their jobs.
Yes, if we're being honest, the reason why Eskom is taking liberties with Welkom, they know you're not going to complain because we still owe them 5 billion rand. So they know you have no leg to stand on because here's the argument that our government had against Eskom, right? They say to Eskom, no, you also owe us money. Ever since democracy came about, you've had substations on government land. So we also assume you owe us 200 million rand. And Eskom says, you owe us 5 billion. What's 200 million rand to 5 billion?
How, guys? Welkom also owes Eskom. I thought it was just Soweto.
No. Everyone in the Free State owes Eskom to the event where Malutia Pofung, so the municipality in KwaZulu, they actually, Eskom went and repossessed. Yeah, Eskom repossessed the furniture inside the municipality.
No.
If you go to Malutia Pofung, everyone works from home. There's no furniture.
Unbelievable. Now that municipality should just be dissolved. I mean, they don't do anything, right? They can't do anything from home. A municipality needs to be in a place. They need to be able to connect water, lights. They need to be able to collect revenues. They need to be able to go door to door. I mean, this is outrageous. How can you in a municipality not exist except virtually, especially in a place where a lot of people in that community don't even have internet?
I went there to go help the TVET sector debate, I think 2 weeks ago. I got there and the lights were off. So I asked the people in the taxi I'm with, look, how long do the lights go off? They said, oh no, could be a week, could be 3 weeks. Just get ready. And so you think about it and you're like, There are people who are living worse. I complain about Welkom. There are people who are living worse than I am now.
Yeah.
And that's where we're all going to eventually if we don't stop these people.
All right, so let's talk about that for a second, because you've been speaking to a lot of people. You've been attending these lectures and debates and things. Governance in South Africa, has it reached the bottom yet? I mean, we talk about, investments and currencies and Bitcoin reaching the bottom, and people go, oh, well, if we're dragging ourselves along the bottom, then you buy now, so it can only go up because we've reached rock bottom. Do you think we've reached rock bottom in places in South Africa like Welkom, places like Kwakwa? I mean, really? Or do you think there's still we can keep on digging? Do you think there's still room to keep digging?
So my problem is always the small towns reach the bottom first, right? These small obscure towns on the side reach the bottom first. And you guys in the Johannesburgs and the metros reach the bottom way later than the rest of us. I went to Phumi. They reached the bottom. They took the ANC out, and the people who came in are just as bad. And so they are disgruntled with the party political system in general. They hate everyone because they're not getting what they deserve. And so I think, my question is is it that we are all at this stage, or are there people still out here who still have hope, who are still saying, oh, maybe the DA can help me, or maybe Action SA can help? Because by the way things are looking now, nobody's really trying to help the average South African. And in most of these small towns, if you go there, like you have these DA members, if you ask them any question, you see that these people have given up. They're just there at the council to get money. And so the alternatives are even failing. So I'm asking that because is the rest of South Africa feeling the same way? Are we all not fed up? Because right now, I think the person in Johannesburg values petrol more than they do anything else. If you're not getting petrol in Johannesburg and it's getting higher and higher, where are you really, right? Because people in Welkom, we could walk in any direction and we'll get to where we want to get to. And so everything is like an hour away from anything else. And so I'm thinking that the way in which our country is going now, we must be at the bottom because, one, we saw Cele with this whole money laundering scheme that he calls a farm and auctions and all of that. And so the biggest problem with South Africans is we always suffer this whole, the emperor is naked. We know he's naked. We've seen him, right? We're all standing at the banquet. He's there in his undies, right? No, now what, right? And the second question is, if the emperor is naked in this way, who else do we run to? Because it doesn't even seem like South Africa is running to anyone else. It just seems like we're all just stuck here going, how do we move, right? We're all, oh, well, it's the ANC. Oh, well, it's Eskom. Oh, well, I don't have water. That worries me. That worries me a lot. Because if we're at the end of our wits about it, if we're really at rock bottom, we would be acting and saying, no, it's just me. I don't care. Let's just move on. Me and the people who are my neighbors, me and the people who I love, let's try to do something for ourselves. But right now, we're still looking to these people, thinking that there's some kind of outside help that's coming. And that's going to be the most dangerous part, I think, in the next coming 2 or 3 years. The fact that we're still hoping for somebody to come from up high and, float down to us and try to help us.
So let's talk about this situation with Cele, because I think it expresses for many people the kind of frustration that you're talking about here, Leeto. And it's a guy in a community policing forum in the Western Cape who's just had enough of Cele. The interesting thing about this clip is not just that he's shouting at the police minister, which we'd all like to do, and I think it's brave of him to do that. A lot of people are still very frightened of Cele for some reason, even though he's an incompetent buffoon. But this guy, Ian Cameron, I think is his name, shouting at Cele
Gareth, he wasn't.
What's that?
I don't think he was shouting. I mean, I when I watched that clip yesterday, by the time I watched the clip, I'd seen quite a lot of comments. I heard on the radio when I was driving on one of the radio stations, they spoke about it, and so I was quite interested to know who is this minister that's lost his shit and what went down. He is in a town hall, and he is simply projecting. But he is extremely respectful. He is frustrated, but he is not rude. He is not.
fair enough.
he is
No, you're right.
extremely.
Okay.
He is,
No, you are right.
I don't think any. I think Bheki, there's no way of seeing this other than Bheki lost his shit for no reason except for the fact that the truth is sharper than a double-edged sword.
Well, here it is. Here's the audio, which I want us to listen to, and you can decide for yourself. I'm not going to play the video because it's grainy and also it's a distraction. So rather listen to what this guy says and then listen to Bheki Cele's response to this. All right. So here it is.
James, she was murdered on the 8th of May in Kailicha. She was stabbed 100 meters from where 6 other people were shot 5 minutes earlier. No one followed up that case. We did. Because her sister asked us to help. Do you know where we found the suspect? In the Eastern Cape. We brought him back. He is now being detained in Kailicha. We do that because we care for the community. We patrol for them. We give them training. I don't see you doing the same, sir. And I'm tired of the excuses, and I'm tired of you making this a political thing. None of these people tonight, when they see their neighbors being slaughtered on the streets, worry about your nonsense comments about the Constitution and about devolution. They worry about surviving, sir. And I would like to end off with this. I want to graciously invite you to come and patrol without a bodyguard, without a grand car, in normal clothes with this community tonight, to get the sewage on your shoes that they patrol through. You have a problem, Mr. Minister, because you are removed from reality that the rest of us face. When I visit Mbekweni, I get out of my car and a 3-year-old little boy is taking a poo next to the road because he doesn't have a toilet. And you know what? Police don't care if something happens to them there because they don't have the resources to help. When I go to the different gender-based violence desks at these police stations, especially in the Nyanga cluster or traditional Nyanga cluster, the majority of the detectives have more than 300 dockets on their table. 300 dockets! How do you think you can do an investigation with 300 dockets? It's impossible. And then the cherry on top, and this is my conclusion, is that many of those detectives have 300 dockets, and it's a constable detective. He just came out of the college. He doesn't even know how to spell J88.
All right, so that's just a clip of him, which we haven't seen as much of that. I think a lot of people have been passing around the clip of Bheki Cele losing his mind. But
I haven't seen that clip of Bheki Cele losing his mind. But do you hear this man? This man is respectful. He's not even shouting. He's simply projecting. Apparently, he got escorted off the premises by police.
Yeah, that's true.
What the hell?
Yeah, because he dared to stand up to Bheki Cele and his, as he says, he's disconnected from reality. And I think that's the case for a lot of politicians. They don't live in the world that we live in.
Yeah, and I think that was Bheki Cele's, the reply that Bheki Cele gave was indicative of the politicians of South Africa, right? It's the draft going into the nice Italian pants that he's wearing, and he's sort of feeling the small man syndrome. And he brings up all of these points where he wants to get conflict against this guy and not necessarily get the community what they need. And so he's trying to build up the conflict. That's why you hear some of the people also clapping hands when he says this. He says, no. But you were the ones who created this, and your parents, and this and that, and the apartheid, and I fought there, and I was in the cold water, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, all this shit.
In order to create, to create the conflict that he knows that the ANC thrives in. Because that's what they do. They thrive in the chaos of South Africa. And that's what they try to do in that venue.
Phums, do you want to hear his Bheki Cele's little tirade, just so that you can have some context for that, and then we can talk about it? Do you want to hear it?
Okay.
All right, so here's Bheki Cele lashing out at that guy that we just heard now.
Did not join human rights battles yesterday. That's why I was sent to prison. That's why I was sent to Robben Island. That's why I lived in the cold water. That's why I ate bad food, because I was fighting for human rights. That's why today we have human rights. Don't teach me about human rights. Don't tell me and tell about the safety of my people. I fought for it. I nearly died for it. I was arrested for it. I was exiled for it. Don't provoke me. Don't talk things that you have studied and you have heard, you have been told about. I've lived this life.
By the way,
I've lived the life of being African.
he's wagging his finger
I've
while
lived
he's doing
the
this.
life when my mother
Of
was
course
called
he
the fishing
is.
girl, when my father was called the garden boy. I've lived that life. And I'm not going to take any nonsense of somebody who regards me as a garden boy today, because you regard me as a garden boy. You come here, shut up! Shut up! Shut up! I sat here, I listened to you.
That's pretty much where it goes. I mean, I'm not going to carry on, but you can hear.
No
he
ways. He's
he lost it.
unhinged.
Yeah, he started shouting "shut up" to this guy, and then they took him away. They took this guy away. They hauled him out of the room, and it's just outrageous that politicians are allowed to carry on like this. And I'm glad that he was rattled, and it shows you how thin their skins are.
And you know, I like it that he took everything out of the playbook. He put it all on the table.
My
because
father's
he was
a
scared.
garden boy. By the way, his father wasn't a garden boy. It's worth saying that his father worked for the railways. It's worth also noting that there are a couple of inconsistencies here. He tried the whole playbook. You know, you're calling me a garden boy. You studied this stuff. You don't experience it. And you heard that guy's walking around patrolling these neighborhoods. He's got more experience in policing than Cele has ever had. And it all falls apart when you just dig a little bit deeper, right, Leeto?
No, and also here's, you know, the defining line for me is what they pull in poor communities with our people, right? I went to Robben Island. I worked for this. I nearly died for this, right? He even says, so you don't tell me about the safety of my people. He then says, you wouldn't have human rights if it were not for me.
For me, you owe me that. Yeah.
So he's not talking to him at that time. He's talking to the black people around him. He's saying, you don't listen to him. You owe me for this. This is what I've done for you. I'm
Right.
black. I'm you. I nearly died for you. I'm Jesus. Clap
you
hands
owe me.
for Jesus.
Yeah.
He said you owe me. And so when he does that, this is what the politician in South Africa does. They love conflict. They love us fighting. Excuse me. And they love us angry. And that's what he was doing.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, also, you know, there's deep like insecurity if you scratch a little bit beneath the surface with a lot of these politicians, because the minute you call them out on their bullshit, it becomes like a personal thing. They play the man instead of the ball, which is always a sign that the argument is being won by the side that isn't playing the man and is just playing the ball, which is exactly what we see happening here. I like that he was rattled. I like that this happened. I think it's a good thing to witness. And I hope many South Africans have seen it and that they can all see through all the nonsense that we've been sold. I love this idea of the savior, like, you owe me, I'm the Jesus. It's such nonsense.
Right? And I think the people who are helping our poor people, right, must also be careful when they dunk on the government like he did. Because to some point, there are people in our communities who still buy the trash from the government, right? Because you heard people clap and somebody is shouting, "Ooh, tell him," right? So we need to be careful when doing those things, because now the person who's helping is partially seen as the villain, because Mr. Jesus Pants here has said he's Jesus. And so I think And his tactic was even though his methods and the reason why he was doing it were justified, I think the saddest part was the minister got to do what he wanted to do, was to detract from the crimes that are happening in the community, from the women. Like that guy was talking about a woman in May who got dismembered.
Yeah.
They went and found the killer who dismembered a woman, who
Yes.
raped her, killed her, cut her arms and legs off. And so,
Yeah.
and these filthy politicians get to come to these communities and soil the names of those people. And I think more and more those people should reach out to communities and find intermediaries, because you can hear him. It's when people are at the most desperate point where they go seek out the NPOs, the NGOs, right? And not on a regular basis, where the government now can start to feel the pressure. I think if there's an intermediary between the community and those people who want to help the community, it would be such a smoother process. And we wouldn't even, I don't think people would have attended that summit that they had if the communities and the NGOs and NPOs were doing it themselves. Because the reason why that young man stood up, right, is because Cele started by disrespecting him. He says to him, "Oh, I don't even know who you are, because for me, the real CPFs is the CPFs that we talk about as the police. You're not the CPF," which doesn't make sense, right? Because everyone is trying to decrease the crime. It doesn't matter if the police give you a yellow jacket or not.
It's also because
And
the
I
guy's
think-
white. Let's not mess around.
Leeto, I think, Leeto, I think, and it's one of the things that you wanted to talk about today is about just the reflection on society. And I know it was linked to Enyobeni, but I think it also falls into this particular discussion. It's about the society in which we live in, right? So there are quite a lot of different factors that are also about the brokenness of our society. So not just, Begicele is unhinged. He's a warlord. He's ineffective. He is terrible at what he does. We know all of these things. The man was so bad he was fired by Jacob Zuma, but in all his wisdom, our president brought him back. But there really is a whole other spectrum around the communities within which we live, and the interpersonal relationships in those communities, even before you bring in the NGOs. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and because our society is so conflicted, right? The conflict has defined us. I was talking to a colleague yesterday in the afternoon, and we were talking about how everyone wants to put the context based on color, based on everything else. And so that's why everyone wants to have a little grain of salt, right? My colleague even said he is suspicious of gift of the givers, for instance. He says, why is it just Indians in that organization? Even though they're helping everyone. Yes, because the context of color is so disgustingly dragged into everything in this country. It drags itself in places where you actually don't need it. And so that's why I think even when we try to get into conflict with these politicians, because they have nothing to offer, and that's what hurts me the most, that the people with nothing to offer, we give them a chance to enter the conversation. We must now show them that they're isolated, because outside of the ANC or these politicians, people of South Africa can do these things themselves and can be self-reliant. And so by dunking on them in this situation or trying to include them in the conversation, we in fact bring them into a place where they're irrelevant. And so I think holding them into that periphery and at times holding them to account is actually doing the work that they can't. I think that's where the accountability is. Where you hear this guy says they brought a criminal from the Eastern Cape back to the Western Cape.
How do we get past this thing that you just brought up now, where someone will say, "Oh well, I don't know so much about gift of the givers because they're run by Indians, so how can we trust them? Or you see Becky Cele treating this guy like he's not a member of the CPF just because he's the white guy in the room. And I think he was the only white guy in that room, by the way. How do we stop people from thinking this way? Because this is the poison. This is what the politicians use. This is their leverage, right? This is how they make you think, well, if it's a white person, if it's a colored person, if it's a black person, if it's an Indian person, your whole thinking must change around this. I thought the whole point of 1994 and everything that has come since was that we would stop seeing people that way. It seems to have gone the opposite direction in some ways.
The whole point of 1984 was supposed to be that. But if it is actually that, then South Africans would actually bring about South African solutions, right? We would firstly burn these damn businessmen, we'd burn the damn politicians, and we'd be relying on ourselves. And so I think the first step in doing that, I think, is that the problem is the skills that take care of our problems are outside of our communities sometimes, right? And the problem is when those skills come to our communities, they come from the people that we were told not to trust, right? And when you are bringing solutions, so let's assume you are Gareth and you're bringing a solution. You don't come to a solution and say, trust me first. You assume that people would intrinsically flow towards the solution. The people in need would flow towards the solution, but normal people who are still under the guise of don't trust Gareth because he's white would then doubt your intentions before anything else. And so that's why I say, if anyone from an NGO and NPO is listening, if you want to go into a community, find an intermediary who would help you translate each other's differences, but also your problems to each other, in order for you guys to also become a community. Because becoming a community is not about where you live, what you look like, who you are, but it's the actions that you take for each other. What are you willing to do for each other in order to become better, right? And I think these two things aren't happening. When Gift of the Givers comes, they come at emergency times, right? And when they leave, somebody can then say, but these Indians, they're always here trying to flex on us. It's because they have money. It's because they live in this neighborhood. And so we still don't understand each other's point of view as South Africans, and we don't regard that as important because the politicians want us to think it's not there anymore, right? And then so you'll have they'll tell you that the millennials don't see color. None of that. Throw all of that away. See color and talk towards that color and talk it away. Because the more we talk, the more we interact, the less we see about color or the different places where you were put by the apartheid government to live. We'll start seeing each other as human beings.
So, echoing, I think, Robert Sobukwe, and I saw somebody in the comments as well. One of his most quoted lines, Robert Sobukwe, is about that there's only one race, the human race. And one of the things that as South Africans, we have been exploited against us, all of us South Africans, is really the issue that our differences are so much less than the things that keep us, that make us the same, right? So the conversations that are being had, and this is what you see and what you hear, is people who are desperately clinging on to a power that they feel slipping away from them. This is why you hear Bheki Cele fighting so hard to be loved and accepted as this person that has, and it's not just Bheki Cele. I mean, we saw it at the beginning of the year. Lindiwe Sisulu wrote a huge op-ed, right? Has been in government since she was 40 or something ridiculous, like since Nelson Mandela, and here she is suddenly kind of feeling like, hey, South Africa, hey, Mzansi, have we seen justice yet? And all of those differences that get exploited really do pull us apart further from each other. What's amazing for me, and this year I've traveled more in communities outside of the urban areas, is in those places people don't see those other people. We were in Malamulele. The kids growing up in Malamulele do not have a race problem. Why? Because they don't see people of other races. They really don't. They understand that their problem is not having water or not being able to get to school because the river has flooded and there is no bridge. And so, but also kind of here in the centers. So even in Welkom, you are in a bit of a center because you get access. You get access to the news, you get access to the outrage, the internet, as intermittent as it is. And so the conversations that are being had in those spaces also confirm those biases that we all have, right? Because we started earlier talking about getting different ideas from different people, because those confirmations are, if you surround yourself only with people who have the similar experience to you, then you just have the same things that you complain about, right? And when you in a community like the community in that town hall, and suddenly you see these 6 big flashy cars arriving, it's very difficult for when Cele has left for that community to keep hating on and Ian Cameron, who is part of their community, who they see every day, who works alongside them, who helps them get the solutions. It's kind
So
of
in other words,
bridging that gap that's
yeah, and
important.
I mean, Pums, that's quite a hopeful story, because what it means is that in the end, these guys cannot win because they just don't have the ability to be there every day, reminding us of the hatred and trying to stoke the ugliness. Ultimately, we will win if we do stick together. But I mean, you've just been to rural KwaZulu-Natal. You've just been to Ngoto. Just tell us, how does that differ from the experience of people either in urban centers like us when we live here, and how does it differ from people like Leeto, who's in the Free State? I mean, is there much of a difference?
I don't think the difference is very much to Leeto's experience in the Free State, but I will tell you that the conversations we have in Joburg, on Twitter, on the radio, those conversations are not the conversations being had out there. There was a by-election. There were 2 by-elections yesterday, one in Nelson Mandela Bay and one in Tsatsikamma, I think. And we, Gareth, you and I will rage about not having electricity, having intermittent electricity. We will rage about having water having the water cut off every 3 days. That is because we lived in a world where all of those things have always worked. And we can, and I also saw with somebody on Twitter, with a journalist, with a Sunday Times journalist, talking about how these things are like, they're like air. They just are. And that's why I give you the example of a Malamulele or even a Ngutu. Today, when they have electricity 3 out of 7 days, it is still better than where they come from, where they had no electricity every day. You know what I'm saying? So the distorted view of it is, so the electricity is not on today, but I still have it 3 times a week, whereas before I've never had it at all. And that's the conversation that needs to be had. And we often have the conversation here where I say, unfortunately, what the opposition parties fail at is having the conversation that will convert people in the places where they need to be had in order to have a majority, right? So it's not enough to only be having these conversations in the newspapers or on the news on TV. If you're not on the ground, Leeto, to the point that you're making, that says even NGOs, you need to become part of this community. You need to understand each other. You need to speak with each other, or have somebody translate your intentions and your actions for the person on the other side. But if we don't do that, we won't win. If we don't do that, we won't win.
I want to refer to one of the comments here from Siyabonga, who says, and Siyabonga is a new commenter. We have lots of people. They always said to us in radio, only 1% of your audience actually engages and interacts. I think that might have gone up since the dawn of social media. But it's true nonetheless that we get some interesting insights from the comment section. And there are always people who have kind of the same point of view and repeat themselves. But Siyabonga is new, and he says, let's not forget about the media, who tried to portray Ian Cameron as an unruly, privileged white guy instead of showing the good things he's done for the neglected black community and the great person that he is. I think the point here is, just like he was saying to Cele, come and patrol with us, why don't the media who are happy to show like a fight between Cele and some guy in the neighborhood. Why don't they go on patrol with this dude? Why don't the media do the hard work either? Because they don't want to get their expensive shoes dirty either, do they? They don't want to walk through sewage. None of the media are interested in portraying community heroes. They would much rather show a race fight, a conflict. That gets them ratings. And who's actually going to watch this guy on his patrols at night if they do film him? Probably not a lot of people. So maybe it comes down to us, not the media. Do you think that that's a valid point to bring up?
But I think not even about us or the media, right? So for this one, I blame you, Gareth, right? You, DJs Woo, Mac G, because the media now is reverting back to its base nature, right? Because you guys are whipping them all over this internet. And so they then need to sell the basics, sex, violence, conflict.
Oh, you mean,
right?
Oh, you mean we're doing this to the mainstream media?
Yes, because the mainstream media now is afraid to do deep dives, right? Because, like you say, they're afraid of the possibility of people not watching, right? And so what they would do then, it's easier to then say, hey, white guy talks to black guy about black people not getting crime solved, right? It gets such a small caveman, narrow view that it's the violence, exactly. So that the violence is exactly all that we need to do. Let's just focus on the violence between the whites and the blacks. But actually, the deeper story there is how a minister, somebody with all the power to solve crime, to help communities, is actually getting solutions. Because that guy gave him solutions. He said, we need you to help with training. We need you to help employ these people. Because that's what he was saying. He says, you can't have 300 cases as a detective. That just shows you that you can employ more people to come and help with investigations. We are here to help you. We are here to show you the talented people. But our government hates talented people. It hates talented black people, to be specific. Because talented black people
make them look bad.
Yes. And also it makes them, it takes away from the Jesus, right? I'm now the Jesus I need. And so
I think
Jesus.
You just hit the nail on the head. So, I mean, if you're not a talented person, then talented people are a threat to you. And if being black and talented is even more threatening, that means that all you've got is the black part. And that's exactly what Cele was showing us in that interaction. So I don't want us to be completely obsessed with just this one thing. Can we also please refer, and Phumzi, you can have the last word on this, but I do want us to move on to Enyobeni because there's a lot about that story that still bothers me. You know, there are a couple of stories in the past 5 to 10 years that really bother me. One of them is still the Marikana situation, which we've never really got to the bottom of. And we've brought this up, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. The other one is the this Enyobeni thing, which is new, and then that situation where all those people who had severe mental health problems were put into homes where they weren't looked after. What was it called? The
Life
Esidimeni.
Thank you. Quite right. Those three stories have bothered me because there's no good on the one side of those stories. It's all bad on the one side of those stories. And yet we're still prevaricating over whether or not X person must be sent to jail, whether Y person must be held responsible. We know in all of these situations that there are at least one group of people who are definitely on the bad side, whether it's law enforcement in the case of this Enyobeni tavern situation, whether it's the owner of the tavern. And I know we like to blame people. And Phumi, you said it last week. We need to have a savior and we need to have a bad guy. But really, in these situations, I feel like it's kind of clear, you know, where you have children dying in this most recent situation. You have the most vulnerable people with huge mental problems and emotional problems and developmental problems in the Life Esidimeni situation. And in Marikana, where you have completely disempowered mine workers. They have the hardest job in the world. They're going underground. They got treated like absolute shit, and then the police opened fire on them. I mean, it just seems to me like these are cut and dried. Now someone must go to jail situations, and nothing's happened in all three of them.
you know
So first, I
the
do want to say, sorry, Leeto, I
yeah.
do want to say, just finishing off with the Nyanga
Biggie Cele.
conversation, the Biggie Cele
Mm.
conversation, is that the real hero of that situation is also the person with their cell phone taking all these video clips and sending them out, right? Because we would never have seen it to the point of, Big Cele. What I heard was, I heard the minister got unhinged because of until I saw the videos on social media. No one really got what the full story was, and Ian Cameron was almost relegated to being an unruly white guy somewhere, you know, in the hood.
Mm.
No, really.
That's true.
Now
That's
people are
true.
taking notice. No, you're right. Okay, but let's talk about Enyobeni and what does this tell us about ourselves?
Right? You know, the part that broke me, like I really didn't want to follow the story that much. The part that broke me was when an SABC reporter went and had an interview with the wife of the tavern owner. And this woman sat there and said to the reporter, "Oh, you wanted me to close the tavern because children were coming here. So how must we live? So me and my husband must die of hunger." And so that question got me out of my mind, right? That this person knows what's happening in her tavern is wrong. She knows it, right? And then her justification is, "Oh, well, I'm hungry. Hey, man, the world is fucking me over too, so somebody else must get fucked over. What do I care?" And I was so saddened by that. Where are we living right now, right? Where children go to a tavern and everyone is, we're sad because it happened. And it's a sad situation. We're sad because children died. And it's always a travesty when children die in such a manner. But how did we get to a point where children were all confined in a damn tavern? I mean, this place is reputed there. Like if the owner reaches his target, he gives out a certain brand of alcohol for free to the children. If a child passes out, they say, "No, don't give them water. Here's this one specific drink and give it to them." And so we are in a place now where we must start talking about how the things we put on social media and the things we're all portraying as cool and fancy, how that's affecting our children, right? I remember once, it was way back when you were at the SABC, Gareth, you gave us a statistic that we're one of the highest beer consuming countries in the world, right?
Yeah.
I was very young then, and I was still alarmed by that. I'm alarmed by it now, is that we sort of seem to brag about it. Even during the pandemic, people were telling you how, yeah, I'm willing
They're
to buy.
making pineapple beer.
Yes, I'm willing to buy an alcoholic beverage at 100 times the cost because, hey, I have to live by this thing. We can't live without it. And so that is now slowly creeping into the lives of our children. They're starting to see that as normal in South Africa. And I think the normalization of this immoral actions, of these immoral actions, but also the condoning of those immoral actions. So I'm not even just saying the tavern owner, because one of the mothers said, of the deceased kids, "Oh, I was concerned when my child didn't
The
come
dad.
knocking around."
The
Yes,
dad.
when my child didn't come knocking at the door around 1 a.m. as they usually do on Saturday evening. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about, dog? Why is your 13-year-old out at 1 a.m.? What is happening? And so it seems like a deep moral decay that we're not taking care of, that we're not having a conversation about, because it's an unpopular conversation. I've been watching these media outlets all throughout the week, and nobody has been talking about that. Why, as
No
a
one.
society, are we accepting kids going to a tavern and that
Well,
being the good time of the tavern?
I agree with you about the tavern owner. There's a huge degree of responsibility there, but this thing about making the parents not responsible, because either they live in a township or they're poor, or we've got this idea of the virtuous poor in South Africa and in the world, and we never. It's almost what I call it's what a lot of people would call the the low expectation. Oh, hang on, I've just gone completely blank. The, the low
Yeah.
bigotry of here it is, the low bigotry of soft expectations.
The
where
bigotry of soft expectations.
what you do is you essentially patronize people because they're poor and perhaps they're uneducated, and you think, well, let's not blame them. Now, these are parents. The parents have to be the first line of defense for their children. And if your children enter into a lifestyle or enter into a venue or enter into a form of behavior which is dangerous for them, the first person to stand in the way of that happening should be the parent. I'm not a parent. Phumi, you're the only one. Leeto, you have children?
Nope.
No. So Phumi, you're the only one who can speak here as a parent. But for some reason, we and again, I agree with Leeto. The media have been completely derelict in not paying attention to the parents and their responsibilities in all of this. It's all about the tavern owner. It's all about the police in the area. It's all about the neighborhood watch. It's got nothing. Where are these parents?
But last week when I said the problem is everybody in the cycle, right? It's not just the
because
parents,
the problem when we
the
do
liquor
that, Phumi, is
store.
when we
No.
do that, though, we don't actually identify the culprit.
No, but
We're now splitting blame.
hear me out.
Like-
Hear me
Like
out.
Alec Irwin used to do about Eskom. Remember that?
So hear me out on this, right?
Sure.
And this is why it's important for me to understand the entire cycle and all of the individuals that are in here. You can start at the home with the parent, and you can say, where are these parents, right? Where are these parents, and why are they not looking after these children? And if I put to you that, say, this is a single parent home, or even a dual income, two parents in this home who look after these kids, and they work every day or 7 days a week. This happened on a Saturday night, I think, right? And there are some people who work right through the week and get Thursdays off instead of a Saturday or a Sunday. Or any other time, and are working from a country to country, have to travel to work, therefore leave their kids at home early in the morning to get to work by 8 o'clock and come back late at night, and therefore are not there to be able to monitor those kids and see where those kids are all of the time. Then you ask yourself, where are the grandparents and why are they not assisting? Where are the aunts? Where's the extended family in this situation?
I mean,
right?
you work,
Or
you're a
even
good
the
parent.
community.
You're a good parent. You try to look after your son the best way you can, and you work hard. I mean, this is again the
And,
soft bigotry.
and it's fucking irritating. And it
Let's
is,
not make
but
excuses for these people.
no. It is not making excuses. It is simply saying, and this is why I'm saying to you, you've gotta understand all of these things in the system, right? You have a tavern owner who has supposedly got a liquor license, which supposedly has some kind of guidelines of where to be, how many hours to be open, who they can serve alcohol to, which is a tavern in the middle of a residential area. How is that part of liquor license rules, right? Where is the community stuff? When the police, and so their license agreement is X and they do not stick to that, and there is no law enforcement to make them stick to that. And this is the entire cycle of events. And let us not forget, guys, let's not behave like we were never teenagers. Teenagers are insane and incredible, and they will try their luck with everything. People have stories, and I think the things that we saw kind of coming out, people have stories where their parents had sent them to boarding school because they were not going to be, and people made skeleton keys of the boarding house, this, and then, so all of these things come on, right? All of these things are part of that. However, and when you are in this situation, everybody that has a blame to take, that blame must be apportioned to those people. The kids, the parents, the community, the tavern owner, the liquor license giver, the police who do not show up, all of them.
Yeah, it's the bottom falling out of the bucket, right? Everyone who should have done something failed dismally, right? Because I'm even saying that, like the parents, but now the problem is this: we're not having that proper conversation, Phumi.
Yeah.
We're just having it about the one and not the other, right? Because I was thinking about myself, right? I know I'm selfish about it, but we in my neighborhood there in the township, there's an open field where all the older boys, so me and the other guys, the Nyaupe boys, the people who don't work, we're all like, no, let's all get our shovels from home and let's make a field for the kids, right? That every afternoon, the one Nyaupe boy who used to know how to play soccer, we'll buy him some beer after practice, he'll practice the kids, and then when he's done with that, we'll buy you 2 or 3 beers. That's the responsibility of the young guys who work and the young guys who don't work. We're going to make sure that the little kids know at least how to play soccer on the afternoons, right? And so even that failed, right? Because apparently, if you go to that place, there's nothing for kids to do. There's no park, there's no place, there's nothing else. And so everything that could have fallen apart has fallen apart in that society. But
Sports
my
has
problem
been taken out of the school system. Public schools
Yes.
don't have any sports.
And so my issue is that if and when that happens in other places, because it could happen. Now we've seen that it could happen. That everything that can fail has failed. How do we start to redress that? Simply on a moralistic basis, like on a moral fiber basis, to say, as a community, what are we not willing to accept? That the one guy in the community who's the loudmouth can go to that tavern and keep saying to that guy, hey, but my nigga, what are you doing? Why do you keep letting these people in? Do you understand? Can we not start building that? Because if we don't, this could occur more and more. And it won't just be kids next time. It won't just be, it will be another kind of disaster that we are not aware of, that we think is the cool thing until people die.
Well, the one thing I think we'll all agree is that there is no place for attention-seeking politicians at funerals for children like this. There is no reason that Cyril Ramaphosa should find his way to. And if I were a parent of these children, this would add insult to injury. This would not be a comfort. You know, these politicians who cloak themselves in the idea that they're there to comfort the bereaved. I mean, I can't imagine a worse thing than a politician arriving if I'd lost my child in a tragedy like this. I find it all just so tasteless and ugly. And yet he arrives, and then Phumi, you pointed out earlier, he fell asleep.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Midway through everything.
Talking about a
Jesus.
systemic failure. The entire infrastructure around the president is also failing him here, because really, is there nobody there making sure that, listen, Mr. President, you're going to be at a long funeral in the hot sun. You should have a nap on your way there so that you're not falling asleep in front of the cameras. But hell, why is there nobody saying, why the hell are you going to this funeral? Why the hell are you going to this funeral? It reminded me, Leeto, you were talking earlier about kind of I did this, I went to exile, all of those old images. It reminded me of the old imagery that we used to see a lot of in the 80s of the mass funerals, you know, the 15 coffins
I remember those.
lined up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It
And they
reminded
even,
me of that. And I was just like, what are these
whoever
people doing?
got the tender for that state funeral also wanted to do the tacky thing of making all the coffins look the same. It sickened me. I was sitting at home almost scratching my eyes out. It was so cringeworthy. They took over the whole process, you know, the process of the community going back to the home, sitting with you, eating with you, trying to help you through this. Oh, no. We have little government packets for you. Just sit where you are. We're going to take the caskets away to where the funeral is going to be held. I'm like, no. That's not what you need at that moment. That's not what the community needs. That's not what the country needs. That's not what those people need. Get out of the way so people can do what they do to mourn. No, they're there trying to take everything over because a tender was given out. It was sickening.
It was
All right,
awful.
so can we
was
quickly?
awful.
We've got like a minute or two left, and I love.
We didn't even get to talk about Boris Johnson and the people resigning. Guys, what? You
I watched
see
a bit
now.
of this before my power went out last night, I saw a little bit of him being questioned by that parliamentary committee. But they had a go
He
at
was
each other,
being-
and
Yo,
I must tell you, I mean, if I were Boris Johnson, I must tell you, I really admire. I've always thought he was a bit of a buffoon, and I liked it when he wrote for GQ about cars and women and things like that. But I've always thought that Boris was completely out of his depth as a prime minister. But I have to say, after watching him being taunted, interrogated, and cajoled like he was yesterday by these people, the way he maintained his cool was unbelievable. I would have lashed out and jumped over that table and physically attacked
You'd have
some of
pulled
these
a
men
biggie
who
Cele.
were questioning him. Jesus,
yeah,
he was,
shut up.
he was so cool and calm. And I mean, clearly they didn't throw him out last night, because that was the talk before my power went out, and then I decided to go to bed, that they were going to actually have him
A vote of
recalled.
no,
Yeah.
a vote of no confidence, and with
What they
all
did
of
to
his
John
people.
Major.
Yeah, but
I think they're having backroom channel chats about him resigning.
Yeah, there is that's the only way
He
they can
could
get it
survive
out.
this. I mean, he could survive this.
If he refuses to resign, he's going to survive, because the next vote of no confidence must be triggered in the next 12 months from now, because it's just had one. So they can't do it now.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's the loophole that's saving him. Yeah. So it's either that they frustrate him to a point of resignation, but I think he still, after last night, he got a few fans. He was toughing it out so well last night that I did sort of clap for him and go, yeah. Under the circumstances, yeah. But you know, his mouth sometimes gets him into so much trouble, and sometimes gets him out of so much trouble. He's got a very bad relationship with words. I just had to say.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time this morning, Leeto. It's always good to have you on the show, and thank you for your insights today. Slightly less frustrating than some of the occasions where we talk, not because you are being frustrating, but because there's so few answers to our ongoing questions and to our problems. I hope we get to chat again soon, and thank you for your participation. And obviously to everybody in the comments, sorry we didn't get to all of them. There were some very, very interesting and valuable comments, and some comments that I just ignored. But we'll continue this conversation next week.
So you ignore some of them.
Yeah,
I see.
ignore some of them.
I see.
I did. Yeah, I'm the Becky Cele here. Shut up, shut up, shut up. We will see you next Thursday for another Burning Platform. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. Cheers, everybody. Have a happy day. Bye-bye.